This is SciByte, episode 57 for August 7th, 2012. Hi everyone, and welcome to SciByte, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly science podcast. Fresh every Wednesday morning over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. My name is Chris, and joining us, like every single week, is our host, Heather. Hey there, Heather.
Hey there, Chris.
Hey, happy science to you.
Happy science.
What are we talking about this week, Heather?
Today, we're going to take a look at the Curiosity Rover. It's landing on Mars, Sunday, August the 5th. We have an interview with Mars Society President Robert Zubrin. And as always, we're going to take a peek back into history and up in the sky.
I am really looking forward to this week's episode. Of course,
Yes.
I was glued to the Curiosity Rover landing.
Yes.
So why don't we do the news? All right, Heather, I have a guess, but what is our first news story?
Yes, I don't know if there was any other news this last week. I'm not really sure. I don't know.
I was kind of in a blur.
Yeah, everything was in a blur. The world was Curiosity Rover.
Yeah.
This is a huge rover launched 8 months ago. It's got 10 different instruments. It's huge an amount of the instrumentation on it that it can go and it can search for various bits of methane for biogenic life, searching for these kind of things. In fact, I was able to talk to Dr. Robert Zubrin about this a little bit last week before the landing. He is got advanced degrees in aeronautics and astronautics, a doctorate in nuclear engineering, president of the Mars Society, and a company, aerospace company, Pioneer Astronautics, and author of a number of books, including The Case for Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a link of The Case for Mars, and he's on the show. We play him right now.
Yeah. We've heard a lot about this so-called 7 minutes of terror, referring to the landing style of this rover, using a parachute, jetpack, sky crane system instead of the bounce style of the landings of previous rovers. What do you think of this landing style?
Well, when you first look at the sky crane system, which is basically a parachute that uses rockets instead of aerodynamics to slow the spacecraft down and, in fact, bring it to a halt, and then lower it to ground with a rope, or a cable, rather, it appears very improbable. But then when you look at it in more detail, there does not appear to be any physical reason why it can't work, although a number of failure modes are available. I must say I wouldn't have chosen it myself. I would have chosen setting the thing down with rockets attached to the base of a lander, just as we did on Viking or on the Phoenix lander. This does have the advantage that the rover does not have to clear itself off of anything. But it's a new landing system. It's a $2 billion mission. All of NASA's eggs are in one basket. But if it does indeed work, it's a very attractive landing system, and one that we can use for many things, including Mars sample return, because this system is going to land 900 kilograms on the Martian surface.
You mentioned the weight. I believe one reason that it has the capability of handling that weight and the scientific instruments that go along with that weight is because of the power system, nuclear RTG on this mission instead of the solar panels used in previous rover missions.
Right. It has nuclear RTGs that have half-lives of 88 years, and so this thing could literally operate for decades if it is successfully landed on Mars. It also is extremely heavily instrumented. It has about an order of magnitude more instruments than either Spirit or Opportunity, and all kinds of imaging gear, chemical testing gear, the ability to shoot a laser at rocks at some distance and vaporize material and do spectroscopy on them to evaluate the chemical composition of rocks that are far away from it. It has a microscope. It has the ability to sniff for methane. It has the ability to distinguish between the isotopic composition of the methane to be able to see if the methane is biogenic or created through non-biological processes. So one spectacular discovery that Curiosity could make, in principle, if it's there to be made, is to discover a vent that is emitting biogenic methane and thus locating underground life on Mars.
Where does the Curiosity mission stand overall in the overall Mars rover program, and even getting man to Mars?
Well, this mission is, in a sense, a deviation from some wisdom that NASA acquired after the failure of the Mars Observer mission. Mars Observer was a $1 billion orbiter. It took a decade to build, and then it failed, producing no data. After that happened, NASA resolved, instead of doing grand spacecraft, that it would do multitudes of smaller spacecraft and launch them quite frequently. And so we had a rather successful program on the whole, with Pathfinder and Mars Global Surveyor being launched in '96, both successful, both inexpensive spacecraft, $150 million each. Then we had two other craft in '98, both cheapos, but they both failed. But it didn't matter that much because we were locked and loaded with another little guy ready to go, Mars Odyssey, in 2001, and that was launched, and it was successful. And then two somewhat larger craft, Spirit and Opportunity, the rovers, launched in 2003, both worked. Then a somewhat more powerful orbiter, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, launched in 2005. It worked. A small polar lander in 2007, Phoenix. It worked. But in 2004, then Administrator O'Keefe decided that what he would do is, rather than follow up Spirit and Opportunity with multitudes of additional rovers of their class, which I think would have been advisable and very productive. We could have sent lots of these little things all over the planet with different places, different instruments, different kinds of science, and very widely diffused risk. He decided to create a much more powerful spacecraft. The Curiosity is, basically an order of magnitude more instrumentation, an order of magnitude more data rate, an order of magnitude more power, literally, and an order of magnitude more money. It's a $2 billion craft. So here it is, and if the mission succeeds, it will be the best Mars exploration mission ever. But if it fails, not only will it be out $2 billion, it will be an enormously discrediting blow to NASA, coming at the worst possible time when their future missions have been scrambled by the Obama administration. They've canceled the 2016-2018 mission. For the people who are trying to get those missions restored or get them replaced with alternative missions, for NASA to blow it on a mission of this importance will look really bad and will be devastating. And furthermore, you know how it always is with these things. Before the failure, no one knows what the failure mode is. After the failure, it's obvious that it would fail. How could you not have taken that into account? How could you have been so dumb? And of course, there'll be some memo somewhere from some engineer to some manager who brought up the possibility of this failure mode, and they will demand to know why this was not dealt with, and so forth and so on. And it will be used as an excuse to kill the program. So basically, all of our hopes and fears are riding on this mission.
What do you feel are the kinds of things that we might see from a successful mission?
Well, of course, it can't discover things that aren't there. But first of all, if it simply lands successfully and begins operations, I would call that a successful mission. Now, the discoveries that it makes, who knows? It could be that Mars, or the place where it lands anyway, does not have things of compelling interest in that location, and it might not discover that much that we haven't already encountered from Spirit and Opportunity. On the other hand, if it should sniff out a methane vent and identify biogenic isotopic signatures in the methane, that will be enormous. That will say look, there's life on Mars. It's underground. It's right here. Send astronauts here and set up a drilling rig, and you can find extraterrestrial life.
And a really big thank you to Dr. Robert Zubrin for coming on the show and really helping me Heather, I think after that, I have a much better appreciation of what the stakes were.
Yes. That you can kind of hear that
Yeah,
worry in his voice. You were talking about that earlier. And that is why there was literally the whole program, as you said, dependent on how this went.
Yeah, so that was recorded on Wednesday, and it was, he was obviously concerned, and I was too. Although I obviously didn't have all the context that he did. Now, now looking at it, it worked.
Yes.
And he even said in his own words, if it was successful, it could be one of the greatest, periods of discovery on Mars. And are we looking at that now, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole system is going for a couple of objectives. One, determining the mineralogical composition of the surface, the sort of surface geological materials. It's going to try to detect the chemical building blocks of life. Interpret those, look at the rocks and the soil, figure out what kind of processes made those. Sort of looking at the long time scale, did water used to be here?
Right.
What used to be here? How did it get here? Where was water? Where's the carbon dioxide? Where even like surface radiation from, galactic radiation or cosmic radiation, all these type of things, how they come down to the surface and how they all come together to say, what is the likelihood of life before and now and way long ago?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of looking at all of this together.
Mm-hmm. I also hadn't really given much thought to his other approach that he mentioned that they could have taken, where they would have deployed lots of little individual rovers.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, in that case, you would not. This is a really powerful instrument, but it is going to be in one location.
Mm-hmm.
So there is certainly the possibility that you could have said, all right, this area we want to look at, we want to do this kind of stuff. So you send a rover there with just the capabilities of scooping up dirt and looking at it because it's in a really sandy area.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to go over here in a really rocky plain and hope that you land in the right kind of way so that you can drill into rocks.
Right. And they've obviously equipped it with, a whole suite of cameras, a whole suite of equipment so that it...
Yes.
And they must have targeted. That crater they targeted must have been like, all right, this is the place we need to go. Like, if we could bet on one spot to land this thing, this is it, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There is a mountain nearby that they were aiming for. And that was the whole point. There was this crater and this mountain, and they were trying to go for this area because they felt like it had the highest possibility of what. They've been planning this for years, arguing about where exactly they were going to, to land it, where it was going.
Mm-hmm. The different merits of the different locations.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And the landing target, NASA Administrator Charles Bolden said it was like launching out of Kennedy Space Center, sending something to the Rose Bowl, and having it land on the 50-yard line on a Frisbee.
Wow.
So it was had to be so incredibly precise and so many calculations going in. And even as it traversed towards Mars, making tiny corrections here and there to make sure it was going to be in this exact spot. And they were the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is one of the major things that they look and they're trying to find the landing preps. They go through and they take images of this whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they even did a weather type forecast. Like 34 hours before it landed, they took, a whole bunch of, a wide scale surface of the Mars and said, all right, here's a dust storm. Here is some, as it's rolling in. So we kind of know what's happening. And there was a dust storm heading towards the area that they were going to land at, but it wasn't a major one. So they weren't quite as concerned. Anything like this, you're going to build so it can handle dust and winds and things of that nature. Now, the stronger it is, the more likely that maybe it'll get less accuracy. But they kind of gave themselves an idea of what they were about to dive into.
That's, the way they utilized that orbiter, not just for the reconnaissance information, but also for that awesome shot they got of it in the parachuting down.
They were actually able to snap a picture of it on its way down.
I'm sure you must have a picture of that. Yeah, there it is, boom, right there. So people watching the enhanced version, I'll pull it up right here in the feed. So amazing, and I didn't know they were going to do this. I didn't hear anything about this. Did you know they were going to attempt to do this?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering if they were keeping it hush-hush. Okay.
No, the Phoenix rover that landed on the cap, the polar cap of Mars a year or two ago, they took a picture of that on the way down. So they've been planning this since March.
Okay.
They have been, all right, saying, here's exactly where it is. We have to have the time. They've adjusted the orbit of this.
They keep,
they adjusted its very orbit so that they can have it right on cue, ready to go. They had to get it so precise that a second before or a second after, it wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, think about that, right? I mean, we're talking they had to get the orbit of this thing just right to get the timing. So many things they coordinated so well. I mean, I have such mad respect. And while we're talking about the actual landing process, the coordination online with Ustream, 11.5 at the time I watched, I saw that a total of 11.5 million people had tuned into their Ustream stream. They were tweeting just brilliantly from multiple different Twitter accounts. And then on top of that, they had the 3D simulator. Did you play with that? That was so cool. As soon as I got the Linux Action Show published on Sunday, I fired that thing up and I just watched it approach, and it was like 5 hours. 5 hours early.
That's what I had. I was just like, I watched Mars be like, had, my window so that like on the very bottom, the time was exposed.
Yeah.
And on like the other edge, I had it so that Mars was there.
Yeah.
So I kind of watched it grow bigger and bigger and bigger. I started getting more and more excited and, thinking that I could power the world.
That thing was perfectly on time with what I was seeing happen on the live stream.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like unbelievable. It was
coming from the type of data that NASA was getting. You could see if you look at some of the shots in the control room, they have a 3D imager on their wall. Now, it's not quote unquote as pretty. It's got lots of numbers all over it, but that's the kind of thing that they're pulling it out so that everybody can just
are you kidding me? We're getting the same data feed they get?
It's based off that data. It's sort of stripped down a little bit, so we're getting not as much of the details as they are.
Yeah,
they get like the idea.
You're talking about that crazy heads-up display they have? The one,
yes.
Yeah, that was really neat. I saw that in the stream a few times, and you have a video that has it in there too. Ours was much more consumer friendly, but very neat because you could move it around in 3D space and you could zoom in and zoom out. So watching it as it burned through the atmosphere was extremely compelling.
Yes, and so you can see the parachute pop out and it go away. So it was very, very visual, very, as you say, consumer friendly to kind of get people a real feel for what's going on. Because
I just can't think of another aspect of our government that is just this in tune with the general population like this. I mean, this is really progressive. Here's the moment. That's the landing.
Yes, it's landed. Oh my gosh.
Curiosity will take
That's
it.
right.
Those are some happy scientists.
Yeah, I got caught in the wave of happy.
Oh,
there.
I did too. I was elated, and I had this overall like science, yes, and a lot of people online were, and also, it sounds kind of cheesy, but I felt like very patriotic for the first time in a long time. Like I was really proud of something that our nation had accomplished.
Yeah, and that was a big thing. Actually, I heard it was playing on Times Square on the big Teletron or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And there might not have been a big crowd around, but as it landed, everyone started chanting, "Science, science." I was like, that is awesome.
Think about it's just like, I don't know, it's just, it really, the space accomplishments are fundamentally, they feel like they're what humanity is meant to do. Like we are meant to go out and discover and learn and go out. That's kind of like what we do. And I feel like it's the highest form of what our government can accomplish.
Yeah, I mean,
and we're doing it. And it's
yes.
good. It feels so gratifying as a citizen.
Yes. And they have a lot of this. Well, I mean, there are so many images because they bring forward a lot of scientific, information. But you also have to realize even going back to Hubble, there's a lot of scientific data in those. However, the really pretty, colorful pictures, there is some science to that. It's like this color is, representing hydrogen. But they also realize that the public is very visual. You want to see something, so they're able to get these type of things out. There was
Oh man, NASA nailed it with they had the 7 Minutes of Terror YouTube video that became a viral hit that everywhere was playing that. That was pure genius on NASA's part because it was a direct form of marketing. Now, they must have spent some serious money on that video because it was very, very, very well done, but it really got the job done.
Yeah, and now they've got a one image of as it coming down. They actually had a camera on it so that starting at about, have 1,500 different resolutions pictures as they came down. So they have it there, and they're able to take pictures as it came down on the landing.
Right.
The Mars Descent Imager. So they've already have one low-res sort of animation film. So it's just a whole bunch of pictures that they, can go through at a specific rate, and you can see as it's coming. Yeah, stitch them together. So as it's coming down, and the last couple, you can see the dust flying up from the jetpack right above it.
Oh, cool! All right, that's neat.
So they've already come out with the low res version of it, and of course,
and that comes out later just because of what the upload time.
Yeah,
so like the first thing, even though it's taken all those photos, the first thing it sent home was the landing photo.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there. There was going to be a limited window. There was the mountain that was going to be in the way. So it was about to cut off the communication. So it needed to send back stuff. So it took, they call it, the little thumbnails came back. So they took really low-res versions of a couple of pictures, as, the front and the back, the hazard cameras, and they shot that back. So it's a small image packet that they can send up really quick. And so then they'll have the higher res images that they kind of store on board.
Right.
And then send them on.
And it's fairly modest computer system. It's like a pretty low end, like 200-something megahertz G3 style processor, PowerPC, 256 megs of RAM or something like that. Pretty, but all that kind of stuff is always very conservative.
Yeah. I mean, and then it was a minister. There was so much that had to come together. 500,000 lines of code.
Oh, here it is.
76.
I think I found the the descent you were talking about. I just had to read the lingo. This is they are actually able to watch it land on the surface. This is so neat.
So they were able to stitch together. They had about where it was supposed to go. They had this image. They had the image that the reconnaissance orbiter took, as, in flight. And they were able to pinpoint its landing to within just a couple feet.
Wow.
And they were like, this is where we landed.
Well done.
I mean, because of, this film, they're able to track out, all right, here's this crater, here's that crater. And as we're going in, pinpoint it to this specific spot.
This is such a triumph. It's so awesome. And now, I think what do you think of the headlines? Is it hyperbole? Have people been going overboard when it said the rover's there to search for life? Is that sort of overselling it, do you think?
Well, of course, it's going to be shiny and big to say that kind of a thing. The more conservative view that NASA's taken is saying, we're just looking for habitability. We're going out and we're saying, this swamp has all the stuff that would make this kind of duck happy.
All right, or this was definitely a riverbed or something like that, right?
Yeah, this was, this part of the desert used to be a river, or you say, part of the Antarctic, used to be full of tropical life. Okay, thumbs up. And that's where they stop. Now, Dr. Zubrin kind of mentioned there might be some where they can say, oh, wow, we actually see something right now, that something is happening, that we can see this offshoot of methane that would indicate current microbial something in the soil. But its main idea is to just check its habitability now and its habitability in the past.
Right. Okay. So that would be really a lucky shot if it got a little methane offshoot.
Well, yeah.
And it has super, super sensitive sensors for that kind of thing.
Yes, it has various sensors and instruments going about exactly what this thing is going to look for. It's got the ability to look at lens images, so they can go out and pick things up and put it into a high speed, a very incredibly good camera, so it can take color pictures as tiny as 12.5 microns.
Yeah.
The width of a human hair. So it's got the ability to go through and X-ray diffraction to sort of beam through a sample to say, all right, here's the exact mineral crystalline structures of this little bit of dirt. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, the laser, because it has a laser. It can shoot rocks up to 30 feet away, and it can look at the the dust that comes out and take a spectrograph of that and say, all right, this is what's there.
Huh. He also in the interview mentioned that it has a nuclear reactor, right, as its power. And
not quite, but yes, it is nuclear powered.
Okay.
It's kind of
not like a reactor then, because that would be ridiculous.
No, not a reactor.
Right, but okay. But
radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's okay. So all right.
Because that obviously makes sense. What it is
well,
is
it like it boils, right? It's a heat thing, right?
Yeah. It's as the decay, as the radioactive material decays, it is giving off heat.
Right.
And then there is a heat difference that you can take in a junction, and you can say from the cold atmosphere of Mars to this heated radio off heat of this radio decay, then you can get electricity from that.
He said potentially 80 years.
Yeah, it has the half-life of that. So the half-life of it'll stay radioactive for that long. Now, fairly obvious to me is that the equipment won't last that long.
Right. Especially with the sand storms and the seasons, and over the years, it's just going to start to wear down.
Yeah, now it does, the way it's made up because of the RTG, the radioisotopic power, makes it more able to handle the winter. The rovers that we have now, Spirit and Opportunity, one of them past tense, but they had the solar panels, and that had a limited power source, so they had to shut down for the winter because the sun was too low in order to keep enough power to keep going. Mm-hmm. They had to it was barely enough power to keep everything warm enough not to freeze up. Mm-hmm. Now, this, the RTG as they call it definitely has enough heat. It has enough heat to keep everything piping warm all winter. And
doesn't it actually literally have piping, and it has like a fluid that it can move around to keep different areas of it warmer from the reactor thing or whatever? Didn't they in one of the SciBytes, didn't you say that?
I believe maybe so. I don't want to misquote myself, but yeah, there are.
Because myself hates that when myself does that.
Well, break the science now or before. I don't want to break the science. Right. But yeah, you want
we'll have to consult with past selves.
Okay, I'll talk to Pat's tether later.
I do remember something about there was some sort of innovative way it kept itself warm.
Yeah, the kind of thing where it would pipe through everything to make sure that this instrument stays warm, it doesn't freeze up, and they keep at various temperatures that they want to be at. Mm-hmm. So, there's that. So you have all this power, and then all that power makes not only to heat everything, but to create that energy so that you can have lasers and X-ray diffraction and all these different things. You can have spectrometers to be able to analyze the mineralogy and the methane and all these type of things to really power those instruments. You have all this extra power. Mm-hmm. Looking at minor instruments like looking at the weather. to, being able to power these more complicated things. So the fact that it does have this RTG gives it the extra power to have the suite of things going on, which is why everyone is so excited. A lot of people are very excited because it can look at so many different things and analyze. The analytical power of this is,
and the runtime means a lot of different people are going to be able to look at a lot of different things, I would think.
Yeah, and they'll be able to take it further.
Yeah.
And essentially, as far as the dust storms don't get into the gears and you actually get, mechanical wear and tear, then this thing could just keep trucking.
I mean, after a while, the wheels could fall off. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah,
but
you'll get one wheel that'll jam. I mean, that's what had problems with Spirit and Opportunity with that, where a wheel jams up. So now the other wheels are kind of just dragging him along.
In fact, speaking of the wheels, don't they have something kind of interesting about them? I think we've mentioned it once before, but I think it bears repeating.
Yes. Part of the problem that we ran into, Spirit and Opportunity, they both got stuck in those sand drifts. And there is a long delay between when you send the data and when it comes back. So, you look at all the, the rocks and everything around you, and then you plan out, and you're like, okay, we're going to go forward and turn 30 degrees and drive forward another foot, and that's going to be what we do today.
The
problem is you get the pictures back at the end of the day, and you're buried rim deep in sand because it kept trying to go. So then what they realized is they had to have a way for the onboard computer to say, all right, we need to track essentially an odometer in the dirt that says, all right, these gaps should be these far. And if it's not, if they're getting closer and closer, it means we're having some wheel spin. Stop, ignore what Earth says.
Right.
Until Earth decides that something different needs to happen.
Interesting. That is very smart. Okay.
And so what they did is they made specific markers in the wheels that actually are Morse code for JPL.
Right.
So they're leaving Morse code of JPL as they, traverse the Martian landscape. Now, of course, the winds will pick up and it'll get blown away. But in the meantime, you're leaving Morse code.
Well, and the thing can snap a picture of it too, so they can look at. Those are treads that I'm sure that it can look at to just kind of mark progress too.
Well, yeah, that's what I was indicating, is that they've got what they call hazard cams, in the front and in the back. That's some of the first images that came down were from those, because they're fairly low res, and essentially it's just kind of check.
Right there on the wheel, is that what I'm looking at there? Is that
what you're looking at? I believe is the markers on the wheel itself, which is the Morse code for JPL.
Oh, looks like there's
the cameras are kind of underneath the edge of the bed of the craft.
Gotcha.
So they can look at, the rear will look at the wheels, see how they look and where they are, and be able to look at the JPL markers. So they can look and see, the computer can look, the scientists can look to see what's nearby, what's around the wheels, make sure that the odometer is essentially kicking off at the right pace, that you're not getting buried deep into something. You're not, are you sliding? Are you burying yourself? Or whatever is going on. One thing that we mentioned a couple times and came up in the interview was the power. I mentioned, and that RTG allows you to get all of this going.
Yeah. So
there's just a lot going on here. The fact that, we mentioned the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO, that snapped a picture of it coming down.
Yeah.
It actually came into the whole communication process. We were able to get the real-time data, or, quasi-real-time data, because of that satellite.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All these are able to kind of, the rovers and the orbiters communicate with each other often. And this one is able to communicate to the orbiter, which has a much larger dish. So it was able to beam everything back really quick, and we were able to see it in just the 13, almost 14 minutes. Otherwise, it was going over the, the horizon. It'll be on the backside of Mars, essentially, until it comes back so we can talk to it again once it gets through half a day.
Now, that was a brilliant coordination, not just for the cool picture that we got,
Yeah.
But just the way it assisted in communication and all of that, it was so well executed by NASA. I'm just really blown away.
Quite a bit of planning. There are a couple of different orbiters around Mars, and they tweaked the orbit of all of them so that they could all kind of be aiming towards where it was going to land. They wanted pictures. Now, everything, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was able to send something back immediately. Now, there are high-res images, and the other orbiters are all, you take pictures and you hold them, and then you send them on. So they've got them in the coming weeks, all the various images from the orbiters, from the rover. As time goes on, we'll be able to get the higher res images. I believe some of them are going to be essentially HD imagery.
It'd be interesting to see the feed we're going to get. I would imagine we'll probably have a few updates over the next many SciBytes. We're probably just going to get a constant stream of cool information.
Yeah, it's going to be a flurry of stuff probably in the next month or so, because it's going to take a couple weeks for everything doesn't start right away. They probably won't start driving for a month or two. They're going to settle down. They're going to make sure everything is running, make sure all the computers are happy and communication is set.
You really think it could be a month or two before they drive?
I know it's going to be in this next week before the camera on the mast. It's going to be sometime this week that it's raised. I mean, they're going to go through and check every piece of equipment, make sure it by itself is happy, and go through and check other things.
Is it about scientific validation? So that way, if the instrumentation detects something, they know it's valid. Is that what's at stake here?
Some of that. Somebody just want to make sure everything checks out. If there is an issue, if something is pulling more power when it, do you have a gear on the arm that for some reason binds up and it takes a little bit extra power and it has to maneuver just differently to get to a rock surface? Or does the mast camera hook up here? Or just making sure everything works and how everything works.
Right, because this, I guess, it's not just the fact that it just went through a space landing, which it can be a little bumpy, but also the fact that this is actually the first time it's really been in operation, isn't it?
Yes, I mean it's everything was checked out here on Earth.
Yeah,
but in the meantime, it spent 8 months getting to Mars. I believe once or twice talking about coronal mass ejections, solar flares. It got hit at least twice with fairly decent sized coronal mass ejections. So it had all these cosmic rays, hydrogen particles hitting the craft. So you want to make sure that happened. From the traveling in space, from the landing to the cold in space to the heat in the atmosphere to the cool on the ground, how everything came together to make sure that it all works. It has a sort of twin here on Earth, so that they can a mechanical twin. So they can demo stuff. So if something acts differently than they think it should, then they can come back to Earth and like, all right, you hold that thought, Mars, and then come back to Earth.
It really is a laboratory.
Complete.
It fills chambers with samples. It loads those samples into slides and moves those slides into place, and then blasts it with a laser, and has collection trays. And I mean,
those are it's X-rays that they're shooting through that, and it's the diffraction. They're able to tell the exact crystal composition and how they are layered, and all of this data goes into the details. And like you said, it has this huge suite of what it can do. And so the possibilities of where this can go. We're gonna travel up this mountain, so it has layers. So you can look at the various layers. You can essentially, like layers here on Earth, kind of go back in time, similar there. So you can kind of track, what the surface of Mars was in the past.
Right. See what the soil sample or the rock sample, what it's made up of back then.
Yes. So you're checking all this stuff, and the analysis, and it's all coming together. But before you can get there, you're going to check out everything. And then once the communication is set, once you know exactly how the instruments are acting, how they coordinate together, that you can laser rocks and you're protected against little Marvin the Martian in case he comes. Then you can start.
What do you suppose? Could it find something? What do you think?
Well, it certainly could.
But what do you think? You think? I know you hope.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm fairly certain that at some point there was a really good chance that microbes were hanging out there.
Yeah, we're kind of too late to the party, aren't we? Probably a pretty good chance the party's over on Mars.
It's definitely a possibility. If you believe Dr. Zubrin, who we had on earlier, he definitely believes that there are spots that under the soil it could be warm enough and moist enough that the UV radiation hitting the top of the soil wouldn't kill it off, buried underneath. So there are sections of the scientific community like him that believe, yes, we could actually see something now. There are people who say, well, we actually need like a drill and a little burrowing something in order to see what would be down there. But for now, what this is looking for is exactly that, just saying, what is the habitat now? What was the habitat? Does any of that match up with the ability to have some sort of microbial life?
It'll also leave a sort of a beacon of the human race if something ever happens to us on this planet. if another species comes along and finds that little rover, it'll really kind of indicate where we were at. Although they'll get a kind of a misunderstanding of our computer capabilities, but they'll hopefully be impressed by our robotics and our mobile laboratory capabilities.
Yeah, they'll be like, hey, look at that! They had a little go-kart.
Hopefully they'll give the old G3 processor, the PowerPC processor, a pass and just say, well, they were kind of rookies. Well, so other than the fact that we can look forward to continued future Curiosity Rover coverage on this show, any other thoughts on it?
No, I just pretty much that I'm looking forward to as the high-res images come in over the next few weeks, and then as the months and hopefully years come down the road, we see more and more of this, instrumentation and scientific data come out of this so that we can see get a better idea of what exactly is there.
Gosh, it's gonna be good stuff for the show. It's the best part. It's great for everybody, but it's great for SciByte.
Yes.
Now, actually, speaking about things that are not just great for SciByte, but really things that are good for everybody. That's right. I'm talking about you, everybody. Not only do we have Dr. Robert, what's his last name? Zubrin. Zubrin's book. We have that in the show notes, which if you grab that, you'll be supporting the show. But I just want to give people an update. We also have, now we have official affiliate plugins for your browser in the Chrome and Firefox extension stores. And the nice thing about that, it means that they won't get disabled if your browser does updates. So we have links to those at the bottom of JupiterBroadcasting.com. You just go over to our website and you'll find them at the very bottom of the website. And if you install those when you visit sites that support our affiliate, then your shopping session will be tagged for Jupiter Broadcasting, and a portion of your shopping cart will go to Jupiter Broadcasting. It's usually pretty small, but in aggregate, it ends up being a great way for the community to directly support Jupiter Broadcasting, so that way we can keep all of the advertising down to a minimum, and you guys are the ones who are the producers. We only have to answer to you. It's a great system, and you can get yourself something, and you get us a little something when you're doing that. So thank you to everybody who grabs those. The old extensions are still working. However, we're pushing updates out to the ones that are in the stores. So if you have our old extension, you might want to remove it and go get this one, because we just added a new affiliate this last week, and they were just published in both stores. So, and then that'll be where we do all the future stuff. So as long as you have the ones that are from the official Chrome store and the official Firefox store, you'll automatically get the updates as we push them out. And thank you everyone again for supporting the network. You guys make this possible. All right, Heather. Well, with that all done, why don't you come step over here and let's jump into the old Wayback Machine. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Here we go.
Right.
Close the door. Come on.
Okay.
Ooh. I gotta remember to quit wearing that big hat when I come in here. All right.
It takes up all the space.
I'm sorry about that. The first and our only destination this week for this week in science history takes us to 166 years ago, August 8, 1846.
The Smithsonian Institution.
Oh.
Act of Congress signed by President James K. Polk established the Smithsonian as a trust. Actually, it was kind of strange. A British scientist, James Smithson, actually drew up his will, and he had about $500,000, and he had all these different things.
Benefactors?
And so he had,
or no?
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah, had this collection of biological things and $500,000, and he drew up his last will, and he said, I give everything to my nephew.
Oh, wow.
And if he dies without any heirs, then the whole thing goes to the U.S.
Did he die without any heirs?
Yeah, he died without any heirs.
Sad.
The original guy, he never visited the U.S. Nobody really knows why or what his motives were behind it. He never been here. As far as anyone can tell, he never corresponded with anyone on this side of the ocean.
Weird. Are you telling me this here is a Smithsonian conspiracy? This sounds awful suspicious, Heather.
It got us the Smithsonian.
Well, then I'm okay. All right.
So
yeah.
all these various, the whole idea of going to the Smithsonian Air and Space and being able to look at, the ability to look at, things like Apollo 11 capsule or, other stuff, because I'm sure there's other science things around.
Probably.
And in space, probably.
Maybe.
I don't know, possibly. So these type of things are there, and it all came from this, last will and testament.
That's fascinating. And it really originated with somebody's private collection.
Yeah, it started, with that and, some money, and it ended up going through the hands and ending up in the arms of the U.S. And actually, there was a little bit of go back and forth for that too, because Congress and everyone was not quite concerned. They're like, are we really allowed to be a beneficiary to something like this?
Right.
Trying to argue back and forth, and then it was finally decided that it would be set up like Smithsonian is, so that people can. It's a repository of stuff.
Right. So all kinds of different stuff are in there now, and maybe what this really is foreshadowing the future history of my Star Trek Starship collection. Maybe it's my personal collection that I'll betroth to my son, and then when he dies, lonely and without any children or any offspring, it'll then become started for a museum.
I see.
You know what?
All Star Trek, all sci-fi people shall come together and make their own institute and be like, we sign over all our cool models and toys to this repository.
Right. You see, it's the spark. Why don't I just go ahead and recalibrate the SciByte computer so that way we can look up into the sky this week.
All right. About midweek this week, about an hour after sunset, look to, there's a bright triangle. There's the top point will be Saturn. The Spica will be to its lower left. And Mars will be to its lower right.
That's a party.
A gorgeous triangle over there. As we get into Friday, we'll actually see in the early morning, Jupiter will be to the lower left of the moon. And as we get into Saturday, just after midnight, we're actually going to be hitting the peak of the Perseid meteor shower. It is one of the better known meteor showers. This one, it averages about one a minute.
Oh.
Now the moon isn't going to be that big, so it'll rise 1 or 2 a.m. But it won't really overshadow the meteor shower all that much.
Oh.
Now, astronomers are loath to predict what a meteor shower will do in any one given year. Because it is essentially Earth traveling through a trail of debris. So it's not completely uniform. There's going to be clumps, like a trail of cookies behind a kid. There's going to be some little, far bits, and then it's going to be like a big clump of cookie.
And most of the time, you don't know until you step in it.
Yes. So that's kind of where this is. So they don't want to say, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be a great year," because then if it duds, which has happened in the past, and they're like,
Right. Like, sorry, we got everybody excited.
yeah. So
maybe next year.
On the grand average of years, it's about one a minute. But so Saturday, Sunday, this weekend, if you happen to see a couple of meteors, then it's most likely part of the Perseid meteor shower.
Very cool. I'll keep an eye out. All right, Heather, I think that's the whole show.
I think that's the show.
Well, what a great week now. Of course, everyone, you can tune in live on Tuesday evenings at 7:30 p.m. Pacific over jblive.tv or jblive.info if you want the audio streams. Also, send us in your thoughts. Email us, SciByte@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or use the Contact Us form at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting site. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning to this week's episode of SciByte, and be sure you tune in right back here next week.